Give us your take on the defensive lineman first.
Yeah, and I think defensive line is probably the area where, that's kind of been the biggest gut punch, I guess, in this 2-week stretch of kind of feels like endless bad news. Obviously Texas is still getting some commitments where we're seeing guys still join the class, but it's not to the level that, Texas fans are happy with. Obviously they love the guys they got, but yeah, that interior defensive line, we just decision after decision after decision has just felt like it's been going away from Texas. It started with Josiah Sharma picking Oregon in the 11th hour. That one was done to Texas. Oregon came in, obviously, I'm sure NIL was mentioned, but, they were able to get his mind changed last second. He he committed to Oregon. Myron Charles committed to FSU. Kevin Wynn committed to FSU. We saw Zion Williams commit to LSU, who was the big defensive line target from Lufkin. That was a Bo Davis kind of thing, and he has some other ties to the LSU program. And then we saw Brandon Brown commit to or flip to LSU from Texas. That wasn't totally out of left field, but another situation where, Bo Davis played a big role there as well. So, yeah, that's kind of been the area we've seen Texas kind of take most of the punches the last couple weeks. There's still scenarios where, they could flip these guys later. Sharma, I've already heard, is still talking to Texas. So that could be a situation where, when it comes time to signing a letter of intent, it could be, one more opportunity for Texas to step in if they wanted to. DJ Sanders is still out there, the big defensive lineman from Belleville. He's a big time player. That's a recruitment that's going to come down to Texas and Michigan. So, we've liked Texas's chances. I think Michigan is pushing really hard to try to get him out of state. There is kind of to be determined when he makes an announcement, but, that's one that, they can still win. And then beyond that, it's kind of, do they go back this year and do some more evaluations? Do they try to circle back on guys that have committed elsewhere? Do they push for guys like, Chase Sims, an in-state defensive lineman that just recently committed to Texas A&M? He was a guy that, has shown a lot of interest in Texas as well. So still a lot to play out. But at the end of the day, maybe this is a cycle where Texas has to go back to the portal like they did this past year. They signed 2 high school guys and went out and got 3 interior guys from the portal. So maybe that plays out again, and they kind of, look forward to 2026 and try to get it back together there. Or, they try to make some guys they try to get some guys to flip this fall. So still a lot to play out, and it'll definitely be probably the top storyline in terms of, how is this class going to come together?
Yeah. Hank, it's so easy to just have an arrogant thought and look at Kenny Baker and be like, you know what, this guy ain't cutting it, when they haven't even played one game yet. Like, let Kenny Baker really get his feet going, because right now it's just, we don't know yet. He's telling some of these guys things that, like, okay, let's wait and see. And I think when the proof is in the pudding and Texas could possibly be that dominant team that we're all expecting them to be, then things are going to shift and there's going to be a new narrative on Kenny Baker. But I've seen a lot of them just, hate on Twitter and just how Texas fans feel about, oh, Kenny Baker, he ain't Bo Davis, this, that. Well, yeah, we knew that, but he still just hasn't had a fair shot,
Yeah. No doubt. Yeah. And I think that's that's the easiest route to take when your school misses on a top recruit is blame the position coach. It must be his fault. But from what I've heard and talked with recruits, they love Kenny Baker. And like you mentioned, he just doesn't have the full resume to fall back on yet. He's been at a lot of different stops. He's been in the NFL. He's been at the college level. So you could look at that and say, well, this guy's been around, he knows what he's doing. But until they see it, play out at Texas, that could always be something that other schools can use against him, particularly a cycle after, you lose Bo Davis to LSU. 2 of your top defensive line targets are big LSU targets as well. They were using that big time. And that was what a big thing that played into Brandon Brown flipping. I got the feeling that Brandon Brown wanted to give Kenny Baker a shot and play for Texas. I think people in his camp wanted him to go with Bo, just because of, Bo offering him before most and, pushing for him early, which is fair. You can't argue that really. I mean, he had a connection to Bo Davis as well. But, I think, and I wrote this the other night, like Texas just needs the season to start. Like they need, the games to start being played. They need to, show some, success at that interior defensive line, which, they need to continue on. Are they going to match what Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat did? I think that would be asking a lot. But if you can show some development and you show kind of that same pressure you were able to kind of put there last year or similar to, and make that kind of the strength of your defense, it's going to be fine. I think, again, he just needs to be there a little bit longer. This isn't all Kenny Baker's fault. I think a lot of this is NIL. A lot of this is just teams negatively recruiting, saying, oh, he's the first year guy. You don't know what you're getting with him. So again, just give him a year because, from everything all the recruits I've talked to, they love this guy. And, and when he joined the Texas staff too, you couldn't find a person in the coaching circles or anywhere that had anything but positive things to say about him. So, I've heard he's a great coach. He's a great teacher. We just need to see it. I think that recruiting narrative will die down as time goes on.
All right. One more, I guess, piece of not so great news before we get on to some better news. Riley Pedan, what's the latest there?
Yeah, so I guess it was that June 21st weekend we kind of started to hear some buzz that Texas maybe wasn't as much in the driver's seat for him as we thought. I think started this year, I think Texas was the team to beat all the way up until mid-June. I think Texas was in the driver's seat for him. However it unfolded, we were hearing more buzz about A&M for a few days, and then kind of towards that last part of June, it was Ohio State, USC were kind of making the biggest moves for him. And, again, you can know everything about a recruitment or feel like you do at the end of May. Official visit season happens and it all changes. That's when decisions are being made, the final pitch, not final pitches, but, the kind of the closing pitches to try to get these guys on board before the season starts. That's when those discussions are being had and things can change. And so, there's a lot of USC buzz, and then, we kept hearing about Ohio State. And interestingly enough, I believe Riley Pedan's mom is from Ohio. So there's kind of a connection there. It's not kind of him just, doing his own thing. But we heard, they were making a move for him. And, Texas had Madden Faramo on campus that June 21st weekend. And he's another big linebacker target, along with, obviously the commitment in Bo Barnes. And Pedan had been there the weekend prior. So, there was even some chatter, is Texas making a bigger press for Madden than they are Riley? And I don't really buy into that as much. I think Texas, obviously wants both guys if they can. They want to sign more linebackers in 2025. But it was kind of a situation where, if they did end up missing on Riley, which they did, we saw him commit to Ohio State this past Saturday. They have Madden Faramo right there. And, again, Johnny Nansen and his ability to connect with, the Polynesian community and the recruits in that demographic, maybe this could be his first big pull in that regard for Texas outside of what he was able to do in the transfer portal. So we'll see. Notre Dame, there's been a lot of confidence with Notre Dame with Madden Faramo. I think had he not taken that visit to Texas, he'd probably already be in Notre Dame's class. So I think Texas has given him a lot of pause. And he's a guy that, they kind of need to land. Like I never say there's a can't miss guy, but if you miss on Riley Pedan, you have Bo Barnes. Obviously, he's a great player. You're probably going to get Jonathan Cunningham, but I would imagine you want to take at least 3 linebackers. And Faramo's definitely a guy that you would like to bring in. So we'll see what happens with him. But yeah, interesting kind of change up in the linebacker recruiting, situation.
Hold on, Chip. I got more bad news. I just want to hear what Hank's thoughts are on the Decoria Moore situation, because we thought that was a shoo-in. Like, once he decommitted from LSU, just his relationship with Colin Simmons. We saw Big Mama. She was there. Hank, Grandma, she was there. The whole family. Like, it just seemed like a done deal. And as Chip said, we know that wide receiver room is loaded, but man, like, you're homegrown. This is Texas. You're a Texan. I get Phil Knight, but why? What went wrong?
Yeah. I think it's a combination of a few things. When we got word, it was July 3rd, he announced that he was going to make a commitment on the 4th of July. I checked in with some sources, and on my end, there was they're like, oh, well, we're not sure what he's going to do, and I was like, oh, that's interesting because the feeling has kind of been, like you said, Texas was in pole position for him. Not that he ever said that, but his family is all pro Texas. He has family in the Austin area. He visited Texas more than he's visited any other school this year. And he's been their top wide receiver target all along. And so it kind of just all seemed, Texas has done a good job of landing their top guys under Steve Sarkisian, whether it be Colin Simmons, Kelvin Banks, DJ Campbell, like Arch Manning. They usually can zero in and get these guys. Our friend Oregon stepped in, and he took that last visit. He was in Eugene that final weekend, and maybe we should have given them more credit in that visit. Obviously, he's committed to Oregon now, but from what I've heard is just you can say you're from Texas, you're a Texas guy. Sometimes that drives kids away. Sometimes that plays against you. Sometimes they want to do their own thing. That's fair. I think NIL played a huge role here. I think there's situations where Oregon's offering one thing with their NIL, and Texas is at another position, and it's you can't bring in, and Texas's philosophy is you're not going to have newcomers making more than proven players. And it's easy to say, it's an easy out, but like that's just the case, especially at a position where that's wide receiver is the least of concerns for Texas. They've got a bunch of NFL guys on the roster right now. They can go out in the portal and get another Isaiah Bond or Matthew Golden this offseason if they have to. Not to mention they still have 2 5-star wide receivers in Kalik Lockett and Jamie French that are set to make decisions next month. So, would they have loved to have him? Yes, but they weren't going to, put themselves in a vulnerable spot where, they're bringing in a kid that's never played a snap of college football, and that can mess. Kids talk. People know where other kids are at, so you got to look out for that part too. Oregon was more comfortable there, and so I think that's what ultimately pushed it to Oregon. But I think at the same time, I don't want to make it all NIL. He really likes Oregon. Oregon works really hard on the recruiting trail. Dan Lanning is up there with Kirby Smart and, among the best head coach recruiters in the country that kind of just grind. And so I think they did a good job, selling Oregon as well. So definitely a gut punch. And it was like, I was still all Thursday, I was just waiting for Texas to, all the buzz was Oregon, we were hearing it was going to be Oregon, but, I was like, I still couldn't envision, Texas letting him get away. And at the end of the day, they did. And so interesting. Definitely something we weren't expecting this time last week.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with the Texas coaches in not giving these massive bags to kids out of high school.
Yeah.
A&M did that 2 years ago, and it all backfired. Those kids are all everywhere else.
Right.
Walter Nolan's gone. Evan Stewart's gone. Like that number 1 recruiting class of all time, they're all gone.
Yeah.
So you gotta stand for something. And I think that Steve Sarkisian has said, we're not going to bring in kids. Jim Schlossenagel has said, we're not bringing in kids whose number 1 priority is NIL, because we have a great culture. We got a great team. We're going to win with or without you. I like that. And and give the NIL to the kids who've earned it. Give it to the kids who've, gone to work, been a big part of your team, have made plays, been a good teammate. Give those kids the NIL, because it's getting crazy, Hank. I was going to ask you, because someone asked me yesterday in my chat, like, it's one thing for the kids in college to have NIL agents, but we're seeing more and more of the high school kids with advisors or agents, right?
Right.
And that's not good, because those guys are pushing for money over, hey, if you go to Texas, sure, you're going to make NIL, you're going to have a higher ceiling in NIL, and you're going to have the Longhorn Nation behind you for connections for the rest of your life. These agents don't care about that.
Right.
We just want to be able to say, I got DeCorian Moore $1 million.
Right.
Don't you want me as your agent?
yeah, you just kind of at that point you kind of got to hope they're just surrounding themselves with people that truly do have their best interests and not just perhaps a one-time bag or direct deposit, however we want to say it now. Um, and not putting yourself in the best situation for your future. And I think Texas has done a good job. They seem to be recruiting the right kind of mindsets. And I wrote about this last week. The kids they have committed fully seem bought in. NIL is a part of it. It's a part of it for everybody. If you can't, if the money is there, if there's opportunities, absolutely, do what you think is best for you. But I think the kids they have committed, are bought in for the right reasons. They know if NIL is not the number or the amount they want there, like now, they have the opportunities to get there. And Texas is a program that, can take care of you beyond well beyond your football playing days, with all that. So, yeah, it is kind of crazy here. And, I know I was just talking to Dia Bell the other day and he has an agent, but at the same time, kids in the state of Florida can profit off their NIL in high school. Kids in Texas can't yet. We'll see if that changes down the line, but kids in Florida are already getting NIL deals. And so, it makes sense. You probably want to have some sort of advisor, but you just got to hope that they're getting the right kind of people around them. And I think when Dia Bell in particular, his dad is a professional athlete. I'm sure he has great advice and knows who to put around him that, for their best interest. But yeah, you kind of, it's a crazy area and it's gotta be exhausting for college coaches too. And I know they're making a lot of money, so they're paid to deal with it. But I mean, I can't imagine just, you feel like you're in a really good spot for a kid. They're saying all the right things, and then 2 hours before they're supposed to announce, another school steps in and says, "Oh, here you go," and everything changes. So it's a wild time.
Yeah. Hank, talk to us a little bit about Kade Phillips.
Yeah.
Solid cornerback commitment this past week. What is he about?
Yeah, that's a big get. Definitely. In this past couple weeks, there have been some wins, sprinkled in there. Smith Orogbo, then obviously Cade this past weekend. But a kid that he's ranked as a cornerback. He's long. I would say he's probably going to start out at safety. I think they thought he could do both when they were recruiting him. I think he's probably aiming more towards safety to start. Maybe he switches out to corner in the end, but. Yeah, big time player, a guy that Texas evaluated for most of the spring. He was at Junior Day on January 20th. They didn't offer him. They circled back on him, offered him, I think, like in late February or early March. And at that point, we really started hearing a lot of Texas buzz. LSU was pressing hard to get him. And at times, LSU looked like maybe they had the inside track, but I think he really connected well with Blake Gideon. His family is very big Texas people. They kind of remind me of Bo Barnes's family. It's like when you talk to them in person, it's like, oh, they're going to Texas. Like, like they're about Texas. And that's kind of how Kade Phillips's family is. And so big time addition. They haven't had a lot of wins in the secondary as well. We even saw Oregon get Dorian Brew, and there's been some predictions for Jonah Williams to go out to Oregon as well. I'm not sure if that's going to come to fruition, but Aiden Anding, another guy that we thought would be in Texas's class by now, is now considering LSU heavier after they offered a couple days ago. So where you can get the wins, you want to get these wins now. And Kade Phillips is definitely a win, a guy they really, really love, and think that he can play all over the secondary. Like, again, I think he's going to start at safety in his early days, but definitely a guy with a lot of upside.
Hank, this Matt Bilstein says Bo Davis couldn't recruit crap at Texas. At LSU, he's getting everybody. That's probably an oversimplification, but your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely had a good couple weeks, flipping Brandon Brown. Zion Williams is a big time player. I know the LSU was struggling in the portal as well. They were having some misses on the interior defensive line. So I don't think he's getting everybody, but he is getting two of Texas's big targets, which makes sense. He was recruiting them heavily at Texas. Maybe, again, give Kenny Baker a season, get him out there on the trail a little bit more, building these relationships and having a product on the field he can go show, when he's doing visits and he's hosting guys. And I think that'll even out. But, even Zion Williams, when we talked to him at that April 6th visit, he was talking about how he and how Kenny Baker and Bo Davis were very similar in his eyes. And, he was like, Kenny Baker reminds me of Bo Davis. So Kenny Baker's going to be fine. LSU is always going to recruit at a high level. Texas is always going to recruit at a high level. You can go through rough patches. Doesn't mean everybody's, nobody's coming to Texas anymore. Just kind of have to keep weathering the storm. Remember, last July wasn't great either. We saw some commitments around July 4th, as we have this week or this past week. But it didn't really, pick up with the heavy hitters until, we saw Colin Simmons commit in August. We saw Brandon Baker commit in September. We saw Ryan Wingo commit in October. All 5 stars down the line, and then we saw them really,
wasn't Anthony Hill late too?
What's that?
Wasn't Anthony Hill late too?
Yeah, late flip, and they flipped Ty Anthony Smith late. So, this is all kind of maybe predicated on Texas having a good year. I think we all assume they will, and so if they can just parlay that with, the wins with and just keeping the heat up on recruitments. We saw 4 flips late last cycle: Xavier Filsaime, Wardell Mack, Aaron Butler, Ty Anthony Smith. So it's possible. You can't count them out. Texas, they're going to have a good class.
Really. All right, let me ask you where things are with Michael Fasusi.
Yeah. So he's going to announce, we think, he put out a tweet yesterday saying big news on Friday. We believe that's a top 3. And I believe it's going to be Oklahoma, Texas, Texas A&M. For sure, Oklahoma and Texas will be in it. The third school we think will be A&M, but we'll see. But this really boils down, in our opinion, and with Texas and Oklahoma. And that's one we still feel good about Texas on. But Oklahoma has really been pressing for him, and for good reason. He's a really talented kid, obviously. He's really young too. I think he's like 15. He might have just turned 16. So he's a young kid. He's still growing. Kind of still figuring things out, and all that. So top 3, probably a commitment date at some point in August. So Texas is pushing heavy. That's a guy that they didn't really press for Ty Haywood, who was the other 5-star in state. He's probably going to Alabama. Lamont Rogers, we saw commit to Mizzou last week, and Texas obviously liked him a lot, would have loved to have him. He chose Mizzou. So, Fasusi is a guy they want to get, along with Nick Brooks, who's the other big offensive tackle from Iowa. So, if they can add that to the group of guys they have, the John Mills, the Jackson Christian, Devin, and Jordan Coleman, to get 2 top-tier tackles like Nick Brooks and Fasusi, I mean, that's a really good offensive line class, and I think one that fans would be really excited about. So still liking Texas on Fasusi, not counting out Oklahoma, but on Friday this announcement we think is going to be his top 3 along with a commitment date.